Okay, so pretty much in the last class, we were specifically seeing about branching, that is parallel development, and how we can do changes in a branch within the repository, and how do you follow the workflow wherein you do the changes in your local workspace and then merge between the branches and then try to push or pull to your central repository. So going forward, what we'll be doing is like I'll be taking certain problem areas that a user or a developer might be facing while using SEM tool to modify his code in a product, and what are the things that Git as SEM tool can help him, that we will see it. Okay, so let's take one of the scenario wherein say you guys are working on one change, and before you're proceeding for the commit, or when you're trying to test it, as soon as you have finished your changes, you realize that you come up with a better idea. So the idea is somewhat you have to rewrite everything from the beginning. So what are the things that uh, you would do in those cases? Generally, say that it might not just be coding. I'm just saying you're writing, think of a normal way that you're writing a document or something. Okay, so before you have to hand it over to someone else or finalize it, then you realize that you have to do some changes. Again, these changes are not permanent because it is all trial and error which you're trying to do. So if needed, you might have to rewrite once again. So in those cases, what is that we would generally do with we already have in our hand? Any
We
can
might
shoot.
just strike off the unwanted portion and write it over.
Right then, yeah.
Okay, what if the second idea, after you have completed, you realize that the first one is better?
I don't
Might
know.
it might happen because
And you always have a copy of it in repositories, right? And can we just bring it from repositories again?
yeah, but what you said is exactly correct. But what I'm trying to say is like you're not at committing it, so you're still in the phase of modifying it. Only if you commit, repository can maintain a
Oh,
copy. But even before
yeah,
deciding it,
you're right.
okay, so that is one of the problem. Wherein now at any given point of time, you should be able to revert the changes or take back all the content to the original. At the same time, if you want, you should be having a backup, because one manual thing what we can do is take a backup of all the contents what we have written and then proceed with the new content. So this is one of the way that we can do. But what will happen again in that is, if it is one file, it is okay. But if it is multiple files, then it will be difficult for us to remember, because even if you forget to take a backup of any file, then once again, it's going to be a problem. So in that case, if you want to use Git, then there is a concept called stash through which Git is going to help us to achieve. That is, whenever you want to take a backup of whatever that you have done before committing. Okay, so that means the changes that are present only in the working directory. If you want to revert or undo that, additionally, if you want to take a backup, then we can make use of this stashing. So stashing will do two steps. That is, first step is whatever that you have kept in your working directory, which means the changes, only the changes, it will take a backup of that. Okay, and the second thing is, other than taking the backup, it will also revert the content of whatever files that you have modified to its original state, so that now we can achieve both the things. So taking a backup, at the same time you can revert the content to whatever was originally in the repository from which you started modification, so that you will have both the cases. And suppose like when you write a code and then you realize that the second idea, whatever you have written, is again not good, then if you want, you can take one more backup and revert the change. And like this, you can keep a track of all the backups that you have done. And whenever you want, you can get back the particular backup which you have taken. Or in terms of stash, what we can do is we can keep stashing or backing up all those changes, and whenever we want, we can apply a particular stash which we have taken a backup and use it. Okay, so this is the concept of stash and why do we need. So how do you apply and how do you create stash? We will just see some example. So okay, now do we have any changes here? So nothing. So we have some files, right? So let's do something. So what is the content? Okay, there's no content in this 3.java. Okay, there is one line here and there's one line here. Okay, so what I'll do is let me modify 2.java and 3.java with some idea. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put some content into both of these files. So I'll say idea1. I'm just adding the content. So if you see, there will be a new line called idea1 at the end. Similarly, I'll do the same thing for 3.java. So now we have modified two files with a new idea, just a dummy content is what I'm putting. And now if you see, we have both the data here, right? Which clearly says that it has been modified. Now what we'll do is simply we will run the command git stash. Okay, as soon as you run the git stash, first thing is see the output of git status. There is nothing. That means what has it done? If you see the content of 3.java, there is nothing. And if you see the content of 2.java, it is just this. That means it has reverted all the changes to the original place where we started modification, right? And the second thing, we have a backup. So it has done both the things. And now if you want to see the backup where it has taken, you just have to say git stash with the list option. Okay, so now you can see that it has taken a backup. So what stash does is both the things. So it takes the content, whatever you have modified, and puts it as a backup. And at the same time, it would revert all the changes, whatever you've done, and reverts it to the original content of the file. Now, if I want, I can do the stash once again. So let us try to implement the second idea. So now I'll say idea 2 for the same file, and I'll do the same thing for 3.java also. So now if you see 3.java, you have this content, and if you see the 2.java, we have this content, right? And git status, if you say, it will say that both the files have been modified. So now if I do git stash once again, it will first try to revert all the contents back to its original state. Okay, and at the same time, it will take a backup. And if you see the content of the file, there is nothing, and it has done the original content of putting it back. So now if you go and see the stash list, you would see every time we do a stash, there will be a entry which has been taken as a backup and it is storing all those changes. Getting this?
So I'm sorry to interrupt, Adam. So it's just I just want to make sure that I'm understanding it right. So in one word, it's like Control Z, right? Like undoing and putting the backup of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So now, like this, we can take a backup and also revert to its original state. So this is especially when you have different ideas to want to implement, but still you're not sure which one would be the better. So at any point of time, you should be able to get it back. That is the important thing. Now, the key here, as I said, we were able to take a backup and at the same time we were able to revert the changes to the original content. So now how is that we are going to apply? So now the same thing, say that we tried with two separate ideas and then we realized that, okay, out of these two ideas, the first idea, whatever we did was the best one with the results. So in that case, how is that you want to apply the exact stash or the backup which you have taken? Okay, so before going into that, uh, are you guys familiar with any of the programming language like not exactly programming. Have you heard of arrays anytime before? A various
Yes,
kind
Adam.
of
Arrays,
array?
yes. And
Yes,
yes,
Adam.
Okay. So you guys are familiar, right? So Satvika, at least you guys are aware what is an array, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So why was I asking this is, so as we know, in an array, it is nothing but a accumulation of various variables into one single variable, right? So generally when you want to store some value like string or numeric or characters into a variable, we generally use one variable, whereas an array is a group of variables which we can have different values. And the second thing is the index of an array always starts with 0 and it proceeds going forward from 1 to, that means the first element of the array is identified by the 0th index, right? So why am I saying this is stash uses the same concept of array, which means whenever you do a stash, the backup that it takes stores in a stash array. Okay, so as you can see here, the first time when we did the stash, it was stash of 0. That means index of 0 where it stored the first element. And the second time when we did the stash, it took up as the index 1 and it stored. So like this, each time when we do a stash, it will be adding the backup to a stash array. So it is the same way how you have to get a data back from an array. It is a similar concept what you have to apply for stash. That means when you are trying to apply content which you have taken backup in the stash, then you have to tell exactly what is the index of the stash which you want to apply. Correspondingly, whatever element that is present, it will apply it. Now, the only difference is in array, generally, if you add, it will be at the end that you'll be adding, right? So the change here is every time you add a stash, it'll be adding it in the reverse way. That means now when you add up one more element, it should become 2. That is correct. But the new element that ever you're adding is should be adding it here, right? But what stash does is it is in the reverse way. That means now the stash of 1 is actually the idea 1's backup, and the idea 2 which we took now will be on the stash of 0. That is the only difference because it adds from the beginning, not from the end. But other than that, it will use the same concept of stash, wherein if you say stash of 0 or 1 corresponding to that value, you will get it. Okay, so now let's try that. So how do I apply? So as I was saying, you can use a option called apply and you have to give a specific index number of the stash. So let me clear the screen. Okay, so if you want to apply it, all you have to say is choose a particular number. Suppose if I want idea 1, then I have to use this, and if I want to take the latest stash which I've done, that is idea 2, we can take that. Okay, so now let us do one thing. Let's take the idea 1. So you just have to say the array and the index number. So now by saying this, see what happens. So automatically whatever was present in the backup, it would have taken. Okay, and if you say git status, it is going to say that there are two files which is being modified. And how does git knows that there is modified? Because there is some content in the file. You see, it is getting back the contents what you have stored or taken a backup in this particular stash. So you got back the content. So now if you want, you can proceed with committing. Okay, so like this you decide which one you want to take, and you can simply add it back and do a commit. And now if you see, there is nothing. Okay, now the point here what you need to know is, if you see the stash list, it will still be present. That means when you take a stash and you apply, Git will not be removing anything. That means when you're taking from the backup, still the backup exists in the stash array. Okay, so in that case, there are two ways that you can apply. So generally, when you say apply, it will just take the content of the index, whatever that you have specified, and it will apply. Okay, but there is one more option which we have in an array concept. So in an array, generally we say it as pop or push, right? So pop means take the entry of the last content, or push means you add it at the end. That is what we do. So in the same case, it is not the push, but the pop similarly works. So even in git stash, we have an option of pop. So when I say pop, what it will do is it will take the content of the last index, whatever is present in the stash array, and it will apply. So when I say apply, it not just applies, it goes with the concept of pop, wherein it will delete the entry. Okay, so that is when you will be using the stash pop when you don't want it to be still present in the backup. You just take it out and completely apply. That is what pop means. So now if you say git stash pop, okay, what is it saying? You see, it is trying to say there's a conflict because the content what you had taken a backup, right? It was idea 2, but whatever that you have currently in your file was idea 1. So that is why it is applying, but it is trying to say that there is a conflict. So I'm going to take it, and if you say git stash list, you're going to get back both. You still have it. You're getting it, the difference? So when you say pop, you will not only take it, but you will also apply. Let me remove it and show it to you. Or is it clear, or do you want me to show it in one more? Okay, let me put it up in a different workspace. Okay, here we don't have anything, right? So quickly, okay, we have this. So quickly, I'm going to add some content here in 4.java. Okay, and I'm going to do a git stash. Once you do a git stash, it's going to take the backup, and if you see the git stash list, it's going to have. Now, once again, I will put a new idea and I'll take a stash once again. Okay, now if you see git stash list, you would have two data, right? And now if you see that, nothing will be there. You have two. So now if you simply say git stash pop, so what if you see, it would have taken the latest one or the last entry which you had put. And not only that, if you go back to the git stash list, it would have removed the entry of whatever that you have put. So pop means remove the last entry from the git stash and apply. Along with applying, you delete the last entry from the stash list. Whereas when you say apply, it will just apply and it will keep the backup as it is in the stash backup. You're getting it? So difference between git stash apply and git stash pop.
Yes, sir.
So at any point of time when you have applied completely and you don't want to keep any stashes or the backups anymore, then simply you can say git stash clear. And when you say git slash clear, all those stash, whatever that you have kept will go off. So there will be no backups completely present. So you use this git stash clear only when you have modified your change and you have committed whatever exactly you wanted to store into the repository. Okay.
Adam, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Just one question about the pop. I'm trying to understand the concept pop. So I was just wondering, can you once again bring up the bash screen? Okay. In this, one second, let me check the screen, 1 second. When you did pop, so one of the two stashes, the last modified one, or the first modified one would be out. The first modified one, like stash at 0, I guess the last modified. So you're saying that it's like when you do pop, it would take the last committed one and then, sorry, last modified one and it would commit. Is that what you're saying? Like when you once popped out, when you after in this when you said get stash pop, it showed the unmodified the modified file, and when you once again checked for 4.java, it says there is IDR2. So from the previous modification, stash at 0 was IDR2, right? And that's where you have added IDR2 to 4.java. So it's out of that stash list and it's committed. Is that what happened? Did you understand me? I don't know.
Is
I'm
exactly.
just trying to.
Let me
Right
put
here?
it a little
Yeah.
more simpler way. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, to say that we had stash of 0 and stash of 1. Okay. So wherein this as the idea 2 and this as the idea 1. Why? Because every time you add a new entry, stash will be adding it in the reverse,
Yes.
not in this way. Is it
Yeah,
clear until now?
I got it. Yeah,
Okay.
I understood that. I understood that.
Now, when you say git stash apply of stash 0, so what is it going to do? So it will apply the content, that is idea to your workspace. Okay, just applying. That means only the files in the content. It will not do any commit or anything. Okay, it will just put the entry back into the files of working directory. Is that clear until here?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. Now, when you go back at any point of time, you will still be able to see here because what apply does is it just takes the content from whatever respective index of the stash you're saying and it'll apply. But when you say pop, that is when you say git stash pop, it does two things. That is, the first thing it will do is it is similar to what you have done. That is, it will take the last or the latest entry which is available in the git stash. So which is the latest entry or the element available? This is idea 2, right? So whatever that you have done, it is still going to do the same thing. Okay. Now, additionally, along with this, what it is going to do is it is going to delete the same element from git stash. That means what is that you have applied? The latest one. So that is what it is going to delete. So now if you come back and do a git stash, you will be left out with only one element, right? So now how many elements are there in the stash? You have deleted one. So you have only one element.
Only
So
one.
by default, the first element of the array will be referred by 0, correct? And now what is the content that you have here? The idea one.
Idea one.
Yeah. So that is what we have it here. So first when I did a git stash pop, if you see there were two, and when we did a pop, it took the latest one, applied it, and not only that, it removed the entry. So since it removed the entry in the stash, you just have only one element, and that is why it is showing it as the 0th index. And this will be containing your idea one. Got the difference?
That was clear. Thank you.
Adam, I have another question.
Yes, please.
If you again take stash pop,
Mhm.
will it replace idea 2 and it will be replaced by idea 1, or it will override?
It will not
Or
replace or
2
overwrite. It will be a conflict. That is what it happened in the other way. Anyways, I'll show it to you here.
will.
Uh, Actually, I did that, and so if you go back to this, so I did the same thing. I had one apply. I had one stash, and I tried to reapply. So if you see in this, it says two files modified, and if you see the content here, it is saying that you have a conflict to update. So it is not going to do anything specifically, but since it is not going to do a commit or storing it permanently, it will just modify the content. But see, what is it saying? First time we had like the same question. So we had idea 2. On top of that, if you do a pop once again, what is that it is going to do? It is going to say that you already have a content of the file called idea 2, which I don't have. So I am trying to put some new content which is not there in the file. So I'm not sure which one that I should be taking. So I will put it in a conflict state. So now what it is does is it is going to put you both the references wherein we have to modify the file manually and keep it up based on what is needed for us.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, it is the same state of resolving the conflict. So any tool, it's not only Git, any SCM tool if you take, that will not be knowing what is the content that we finally need. So in that case, it is going to help us in simplifying through this way that this is what you had previously, and this is what you are trying to put it from your stash backup. So out of this, I don't know which one you wanted to keep because of our interest might be varying. So it is going to give us the reference of both and keeps both the content in the same file. So now what we have to do is we have to choose which one we have to take. So not only this, in this file also, that this is what you originally had, but this is what I have it in my stash backup, but I don't know whether to keep this or this. So I'm giving you both. You choose whatever you want and fix is what it is going to say. Getting it?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions or doubts before we proceed? Prabhu, is it clear? Satvika?
Yes, Adam, it's clear. It's clear. I'm good.
Yes, Adam, it's clear.
Okay, so as I said, stash is used only when there are two scenarios. That is, you want to take a backup and at the same time, you want to revert the content back to its original state so that when you have multiple ideas that you want to implement, you can simply use it wherein without worrying about how many files you have modified, where it is, it'll automatically take all the backup and correspondingly you can apply based on what is that you need to proceed further. As I said, stash, apply, or pop is just going to put the content to your workspace. It is not going to commit it anywhere permanently. Okay, so if you see, it has still kept, not only in this, if you go to the other one also, it is still going to keep it open. It is not going to add it back to the repository because all these things what we are trying to do is before committing, if we have any changes that we want to do, we can do it. Okay, fine. Now, going ahead with one more scenario. So now as I said that if you want to take a backup, you will try to use stash. But sometimes what will happen, you don't want to take a backup. Okay, you just simply want to only revert or undo the changes what you have done. Say that you have done some changes and suddenly you realize that this changes is not at all required. So then you want to completely revert or undo only that and no backup. So in that case, what you can do is you can use a command called reset, which is going to undo all those changes before you proceed with the commit. But internally, what is the difference between stash and revert is that when I said stash, you are going to take the backup and also you are going to just remove the content of the file to its original state, right? But by doing reset, what exactly it will do is even it is going to do the same thing. So for example, like you modified something and you don't want those change at all. Okay, so when you say reset, it will undo the change and not only it is going to get the content of the file, but what it is going to do is exactly it will take the commit ID reference to the initial place what it had. That is what internally it will be doing. And also in Git, if you see, reverting or undoing is not just in one place because until now what we were seeing, there were some files which we modified and when we do a undo, the content is what getting changed. But in Git, if you go back to the previous class what we have discussed, there are three areas, right? So undoing is not just in one place but in all these three areas. So remember this, you have working directory, staging area, and repository. So let me tell you a little more detailedly. So I'll just remove this. Okay, or let me just keep this. So assume that you have like this. Okay, so now when you basically go to the working directory, you will be modifying some content, right? So that is what right now we have done. So if you see, what is that we have done? For example, so there is one file modified, and what is that? That you have put some idea. Maybe you got it from stash or whatever. What literally it means is we have a file modified called 4.java and we have some content, right? That is what it is saying. Okay, so once you do, you will be putting this content here. Say that we have put the idea to changes for the 4.java for some content of the file. Now, once we do this, what we will be doing, the next thing is we will be adding it. Okay, so now as soon as you add, what will happen? You will get the files that has been clearly saying that it is modified and it is put to the staging area. Okay, now this is what will happen. Now the question comes is, what if after you have added to the staging area you want to undo? Because until some time back what I was saying is only you have modified in the working directory and you were able to do a stash and take the backup or revert. But as soon as you put into the staging area, if you realize that you want to undo, what is that we have to do? And that is when we will be using reset. Okay, but what will happen internally is as soon as you work on idea 2, there will be some changes that is going to happen in the master also. Okay, so to understand this, once again, so you have so many changes that is available, right? So when I say git log -1, what is that it is going to show me? It is going to show what is the latest change on which we are currently working. Try to understand this. It is not the latest of your repository, but it is the latest which we are pointing. Because what will happen is sometimes if you want to traverse between the commit IDs, you can do, which means suppose say that instead of pointing to this, you want to point to some other old commit ID, then you can traverse. So as soon as you traverse from one commit ID to the other commit ID, then the content of your working directory or the workspace will be based on whatever that you have done here. So in that case, now if you say git log -1, based on the position where you are currently working, it will show you the current one. So in that case, whatever that you are seeing it here, we generally call it as head reference, or in Git, head reference means the commit ID on which we are working. Remember, the commit ID on which we are working is what head means. That doesn't mean that this is the latest commit ID, because as I was saying, suppose rather than working on this latest, if you go to some other old commit ID, then what will happen is this will be the head reference of your current workspace, so that you are working everything on this. So at the same point, if someone asks what is the latest commit ID of this, this is the one. So head reference means the commit ID on which we are currently working. Okay, so in our scenario currently, head reference is both. That means head reference is pointing to the latest commit ID. So both are one and the same in our scenario. But the scenario which I was saying from one place to other place of traversing, I will tell it little later. But are you guys at least able to understand? So in Git, if you say head reference, then it means the commit ID on which we are currently working. And currently, if you say, it is also the latest commit ID because we have not traversed anywhere. We are just going ahead with the default latest commit ID. So in that case, what is the head reference of our current workspace? It is this place, FFB6, right? So that means you have this latest commit ID, and what is that you are pointing? It is FFB6. Okay. Now, why is that I'm showing it here is, now once you have put the changes into the staging area, the next step what you will do, you will commit it. So when you do a commit, what will happen? A new commit ID will be created, right? And something like this, it will be creating some ABCD, whatever it will create. But how does it get creates is what we need to understand. So as soon as you put into a staging area, what will happen is you are no more pointing to this reference, because the reference of your branch to this had a different content of the file, isn't it? So when we were pointing to the actual reference FFB6, we were pointing to, what was that? The original content of that commit ID was this. Okay, but now as soon as we modified the file and we put some content into the staging area, the head reference will get moved. That means what Git will do is Git will create a temporary or a imaginary ID which is only a reference, and then it will try to move the reference of the head from this place to this place. So that means now your head reference which was pointing to this place, okay, now will get changed to others. So now until now we were pointing to this place, but as soon as we modified and put into the staging area, what Git will do is it will move the head reference from this place to this place, because head means what? It is always the content or the place what you are pointing to. So in that case, currently we are pointing to this changes what we have put into the staging area. So obviously the reference of the head is not the same thing as we had here. So that is why internally it will move the head reference from this commit ID to a imaginary ID. But here there will not be any ID specific, because you will be getting the ID only when you commit the changes whatever you have from the staging area. So as soon as you commit it, what will happen is it will give some 40 digits or 40 characters number that we are seeing so far, so that it will permanently add. But until it is permanently not added, or until it is there in the staging area, internally if you see, the head reference will be moved from this place to this place, and it will be keeping a reference here. Okay, so this is what you need to understand. I mean, this is only for your reference, but when we are trying to undo now, if you see, there are three places from which we want to undo. That is what literally happens, because it is not just the content what you had in the files in the working directory, but we also have changes put into the staging area, and also internally the head reference is pointing to the temporary ID. So when we have to undo a change specifically in Git, it is not just from one place, but based on wherever changes that you have done, we have to remove all these things. Okay, so specifically in this scenario where you have added the changes to the staging area, and then if you want to undo or revert the change, then we will be using git reset command. Okay, so now corresponding to the three areas where we have, and undoing it also has to happen in three different options. So when you say git reset has option wherein it has an option called soft, mixed and hard, wherein if you say git reset soft, it will just take the reference of the head from this imaginary back to its original place. And if you say git reset mixed, then it is going to do the same thing for the repository, that is move the reference from here to here, and additionally it will also remove the content from the staging area. That is what mixed means. Mixed means staging area plus repository. And if you say hard, then it is going to do all the three, that is remove the reference in the repository head, remove the content from the staging area, and also remove the content from the physically, or remove the content physically from the files which is present in the working directory. Okay, so this is what the options that you have to use. So let's try to do the same thing with all these options. As I said, this is only for your understanding, but typically you will not be able to see all those things. But let me show you in a different way when we work. But git reset soft is not used anytime, but it's just for some references you should need to know. So let's try this one by one. So what we have done in the same here is we have modified some file, and I have put into the staging area. So now we have done all the three. So typically, if you see, we have the content in the working directory, we have the content in the staging area, and at the same time, the head reference has been moved from this FFB6 to that imaginary place. Okay, So now let's try to revert one by one and see. So first thing, let's try to say git reset soft. Let me just go it. So if I say git reset soft, typically it would have moved the reference here. It would have moved the reference, but we will not be able to see. As I said, it's not a physical change which we will be trying to see. But what it would have done currently is moved this change from here to here. Okay, so this is what it would have done. It would have moved this reference from here to here. That means this is not needed anymore. Okay, now on the same thing, if you say git reset mixed, then you see along with moving the reference from here to here, it would have also taken the changes from the staging area. So now if you say git status, you see it is showing it in red color because it has removed from the staging area. Has it kept the content of the file? It is still there. Okay, so that means mixed is going to remove only the contents from these two places. And now if you say git reset mixed, sorry, hard, now what and all see it is doing. First thing what it would have done is it would have moved the reference. Second thing, removing from the staging area, and third thing is removing from the working directory. And not only that, now can you see this? It is saying that the head is moved back to this initial reference what we had. Okay, and now if you say the content of the file, this will also be gone. Getting it? So
Yes,
when you
sir.
have changes in Git and you have added to the staging area, what happens is typically there are three places from which you want to undo. So based on the need, you can choose either to take it from the repository or the staging area or the working directory, wherein soft is not used anywhere. So if you can use mixed, then mixed will remove the content from the staging area, take the reference back in the repositories to the original head reference, and if you say hard along with this too, it will also remove from the working directory. And by default, if you see, if you don't give any option like this, and if you just say git reset, and if you want you can say a file, then what it is going to do is it will work on the default mixed mode. So by default, when you say git reset, it will work on the mixed mode, that is remove from the staging area and the head reference back to its original content. Getting it? So like this, you have three places which you want to do, or the simplest thing what you can do is always use the git reset hard, so that it will not only remove from the staging area or the head reference, but also undo the content of the file completely from your working directory. Getting it?
Yes, sir.
Sam, Shashank, Satvika.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's clear. I'm just trying to make a note of them.
It's clear, Adam.
Satvika, is it?
Yes, Adam, it's clear. Yeah, it's clear.
Okay. Sometimes what we'll be doing is not just to revert. So as I said, you will be working on different commit IDs. Suppose for some reason you wanted to go back to a previous content of a file, then in that case you have to traverse to commit a different commit IDs. And then when you want to come back to the latest content or a specific content, then you can use this option simply. Wherein if you say git reset file, what it will do, if you have some content in the staging area, it will remove. But if not, no matter from where is your head reference, it will bring always to the latest of the commit ID. So this is one way that you can use the git reset also. So you have moved to some other place. When you say git reset will automatically bring the head reference back to wherever it was to the original latest commit ID. Okay, so that is one more use case of git reset what people would be using. Or on a normal case, if you did some modification and you added into the staging area, then you realize that there's some mistake in the code and you want to remove it completely, then you can take it out. Okay.
Yes, sir. That's clear.
Okay. So now,
So,
yes, Ritika,
no.
you had a question?
That's fine. No. I don't have a question.
Okay, fine. So now, so whatever that we were seeing is undoing the changes, right? Now, let's take a scenario wherein you have committed the change. How is that we can undo? So, for example, say that I had this change and let me put some content. I'll okay, so now if I have added one line called bug, or assume that it's the buggy code which I have added. Now, if by mistake I add it and we commit it also, okay, and we got a new commit ID also. Now, at some point of time, if you want to completely remove this content, then how is that we can do? Okay, so then for that, we have an option called revert. Okay, so now when you say git revert and a commit ID, what git will do is it will try to take back the content of whatever that you have done. Okay, so let's try that and see. So we have this, correct? So now when I say git revert, you need to give a commit ID, wherein either you can give the complete 40 characters of the commit ID or you can use a shorter version, that is first 7 characters. So you can simply say the first 7. Okay. Now, when you say git revert, what I'm trying to say is you don't want the content what you have put typically, correct? That means you are going to point to the content what you had in this. So what was the content what we had for 4.java? Those 2 lines, right? So this was the content. Now what we are trying to do is we are trying to go back to this content. So typically that means we should be pointing to this place, right? But what happens with git is that it will ask you to commit once again. You see, it just opens up a commit message page. So by default, when you are trying to do a commit, we were always giving option -m some message, right? So if you don't give, it will open up a page like this and it'll ask you to enter some commit message. So instead of doing like this, we used to give the -m by which it can take it automatically. So in the same case, now when we are reverting, it is asking me a message for committing. So I'm just going to use the default. Okay, now if you see what it would have done is it would have brought back the original content, correct? But if you see the commit ID now, you see it is not going back to this, but it is adding a new commit ID. Now, if you understand why it has done, typically we wanted to revert this commit. So when I say revert, you're taking the content back to its previous one. That means at this place. So this was the content what you had for this file. Yes, that is logically correct. But if you go to the concept of Git's reference, every time there is a modification, it has to create a new commit ID, right? So in that case, even though you are pointing to the original content of this file which was there presently here, there are various other factors which are not going to match. That means the content is same, the author is same, but if you see, the timestamp is not going to be the same, because when you currently modified the files by taking it back, the timestamp is this, whereas the timestamp of this content or this commit ID was completely different. So since this is not matching, Git assumes that it is a new change which we are doing, and hence it tries to put a new commit ID. So this is one of the best security thing wherein Git doesn't allow anyone to just delete changes directly. Okay, so even though you are trying to go back to the previous content, you shouldn't need this, or you don't need. But typically, if you see, the various factors which affects the commit ID is not same, because the content is same but the timestamp is not going to match. So in that case, it is clearly trying to put it as a new commit ID, because when compared to your previous change or commit ID, you have modified something else. What is the modification? It is only the timestamp. Okay, so even when you try to revert a commit which you have already done, Git will not just delete this, but it will create a new commit ID wherein the content will be that of the previous commit what you had from this. Getting it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Aaron, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Getting it? Okay,
Yeah.
fine. So this is what the Git revert do. So now I'll go back to the question I was trying to ask some time back. So now, for some reason, if you want to traverse between commit IDs, okay, so now you did the revert, whatever it is. Now, if you want, can you go back to this commit ID? That means, can we traverse between some older commit IDs or old change numbers what we have? Typically, it should be possible, because when we are able to track each line by line, which means that, see, we are not just deleting everything and just pointing only to the latest content. It is tracking with reference to commit ID. That means we should be able to go back to any particular commit ID, right? So if a chance is there, suppose like the same problem, you have doing one code, you find that there is some problem, okay, where we reverted. But before reverting, how do you know exactly if it is the problem? And at the same time, there might be multiple users doing a commit. So in that case, you have to go exactly to your commit ID and try to do some testing which someone has reported. And then if something fails there, then you can go ahead and do this revert. Correct? So in that case, if you want to traverse or go back to a older commit ID, then you will use the command called git checkout, and you can give the commit ID. Suppose if I say that, okay, see this. So I don't have the content. Suppose if I say git checkout and I give this commit ID number. Okay. Okay. So now if you say git log same thing, you watch it, the git log latest is 3E45, right? Now the same thing if I do, the latest of the git log is triple F90F. Okay, and not only that, if you go back to the content you have got. So what it means? It means when you try to move, the head reference has been taken from whatever you had previous and it has moved. So now if you say what is the head reference of this workspace, it is this. So head means it is not the latest, but where is that you're currently pointing. and corresponding to the content what you had in this commit ID, it is going to show you. Getting it? So we will use this git checkout command to traverse between commit IDs like this. Now, my question is, okay, before that, did you guys understand this? How do you traverse from one commit ID to the other commit ID?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So
Yes, Adam.
did you guys notice this? What is this command checkout? Did we use this command
It
anywhere
is
else?
to
Yeah,
Yes.
check
yeah
out
to fetch the document
Last
from the
one.
repository.
Repository to workspace.
I'm sorry.
yeah, new workspace. Check out.
Okay, I was trying to ask, okay, what I said is just recently, when you say git checkout one commit ID, you will point your workspace to that commit ID and also the head reference will be there. Now, my question was,
Mm-hmm.
we use this checkout command somewhere else in the last class.
Git check out new workspace 01. Git check out new workspace 02. Used like that. To
No.
travel between two workspaces.
Workspaces?
No, workspaces.
Yes. Can anyone tell me?
Like to I mean fetch the files from different branches.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Much Poyara. You guys should remember this. Okay, so it's in just the last class. So if you remember in the last class, when we are going through branch, we use this command called checkout. So what does that checkout does? From one branch to other branch, we were trying to switch, right? Now, it is the same command I am using for commit ID. So how does it knows whether if I say git checkout a branch name, how does it know it is a branch? Or if I say git checkout a commit ID, how does it know exactly it is a commit ID? So now that would be a question. It might be an interview question or generally for your understanding. So how does it know?
Uh, when we do checkout between branches, we mention the name uh, within the quotations. When it is a commit ID, we just mention it as it is. Is that the right one?
Typically no. So you have this here, right? So when I say, I would just say git checkout master, or we just say git branch. We didn't give any codes.
Oh.
And the same
Got it.
thing is what we did some time back. What we did, we just say git checkout and the string. So how does it know whether the string is commit ID or branch? Okay, so for that, you need to understand this. So by default, when you're using git checkout, okay, the syntax for that is branch followed by the commit ID. So this is the default syntax. Now, how does this work is, suppose if you just say git branch, that's it, git checkout branch, then what will happen to the commit ID? It will take the default commit ID as the latest one. Okay, this is how it is going to expand. So when you give us a commit ID, then which commit ID, no, it knows that this is the commit ID with respect to this number which it has in the reference, but which commit ID, because you have multiple branch. So what it will do is by default, it will expand it to the current branch or the default branch on which you are working. Okay, that is how it tries to take it. So that is why when, if you remember, when we did a git checkout of a branch, it always used to point to the latest commit ID. How is that? It is because when you say switch from one branch to the other branch, in this branch you have so many commit IDs. Now which commit ID that you want to point, you didn't tell. So what it will do, by default, it will go to the latest commit ID of that branch. So it is the same concept here. When you say the commit ID, then you didn't mention which branch. So it will do is, by default, what is the branch that you're working? It will go. If not the default branch, which is master, it will try to go and check. Okay, so that is how it will be expanding it like this. Getting the difference between how it knows for a branch and a commit ID?
Yes, Adam. Yes.
Okay, now the question. So where are we currently pointing to? We are pointing to this commit ID, right? Now, how is that we go back to the default or the latest commit ID?
Just give the checkout and then give the
Branch name.
branch name.
Yeah. So if I just say git checkout and master, now what it means git checkout and go to the latest. This is what it means. Okay. And if you see, it will go back to the original. And now if you say git log, you will get back to your original and also the content. So it is the same thing. If you say git checkout some other branch, how is that you are going to this particular commit ID? It is because when you set this, it is going to take it as latest. Got the difference?
Yes, Adam.
What about others? Did you guys get the difference how checkout
Yes,
works?
yeah.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay, so okay, we are almost to the end. Now, so far, whatever that we were working is on undoing, reverting, or traversing, right? So what is going to happen? Suppose if you want to delete a file, say that you have the content, okay, and let me go to the master, or you can do it from here itself. So what if, suppose if you want to delete a file, so now deleting a file in Git should again be done in this area, because if you directly use the operating system command like delete or rm and you remove the file only from the working directory, the reference is still going to be present in the repository, right? So when you are trying to delete, you also have to delete the reference from the repository, or you have to do a commit based on the deletion. So simply what we have to do is, rather than using a normal system command like rm, you can just use a command called git rm. So now when you do like this, you see first the file would have got deleted in your working directory. That means it would get the deleted here. Then what you need to do is you add it, and when you commit it, it will once again get added to the repository, wherein permanently the file will get deleted and the reference would be added to the repository also. So if not, if you just directly say rm the file, the reference will still be present in the repository, wherein you will be just removing it from the working directory alone. That means only the physical content will be deleted, wherein the reference will be still present in the repository. Getting it?
Uh, Adam, I
Yes,
just have a quick question here.
Yeah, Prabhu.
Uh, Instead of using rm4.java, here we are using git rm4.java.
Mm-hmm.
And you said when we use git rm4.java, it's going to not only delete the file on the workspace, but it also going to modify the contents on the repository as well.
Yes.
But uh, but again, here you're staging and then committing it again.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you want to do it when when you say the changes already happen on the repository? The same thing we can do when we just do the rm4.java and then stage and commit it, right?
Exactly. but the difference is you are just removing the physical content from the working directory, but you're not actually changing anything in the reference in the repository. Unless and until you don't do a commit, it will not take the changes permanently. But how does it know that you have to do some changes there? That is what you have to put into the staging area, right? Suppose when you're creating a new file, how is that Git is going to know that this is a new file? So only if you put into the staging area, it will start taking the reference. So in the same way, if you say RM, it is just going to delete it from the current working directory or the place where you are currently is there. But when you say git
Workspace.
RM, it will not only delete the file, but also it will tell the reference saying that, okay, you already had a file. This person is trying to remove it. That is the difference. See this. Let me try to show you. It's not so straightforward to say, but let me. Do you see the difference?
Now I got it. Now I got it, Adam. Thank you. Yes.
So the RM which we did, it says that there's nothing that it can understand. But when you say git RM, typically it is also adding it to the staging area. But as a practice, without knowing it, if you just leave it, it will not be good. So that is why we just go ahead by doing a git add once again, because
Okay.
sometimes along with deleting the file, you would have also modified some content of the file. So in that case, git add will take both together. So every time you do a git add, whatever changes that you have done at that place will be added to the staging area. So what you can do is say that you have 4 files to modify. You will be doing one by one, but you don't want to commit it separately. So first you can modify one file. You can do a git add so that the content of that first file will be taken to the snapshot. Then after modifying the second file, you can do the git add once again. So like that, every time you do a git add, whatever changes that you have taken will be getting accumulated in the staging area.
I got it, Adam. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, now if I want to change everything, okay, you see one of the use case, I've got everything back because before committing, I just wanted to get it back.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Nope, Adam, that was clear.
Okay, let me just go through one final thing. Now, if you remember yesterday, I was going through this file called gitignore, right?
Yes, sir.
So what was the use?
It helps. It prevents the committing of runtime files that were created,
Yeah,
like the dot class.
Dot class files, yeah.
exactly. So if there are some unwanted files which we don't want Git to consider, we can do it. Now, sometimes if you really think there is some scenario where it's going to be a headache because you might be creating different kinds of files and you want to keep adding all those things into the gitignore, right? So only if you know the gitignore concept you would be doing. If not, pretty much it's going to be a problem. And not only that, when you're trying to do changes and when you're trying to work on new changes, what will happen is the same folder will contain all these object files. Now, what you want to do is, yeah, when you are trying to perform some git command, you will be not considering it. But say when you want to redo the build or retest it, you will be still pointing to the previous reference of this file, which means the file will still be present, right? Gitignore will just avoid the git commands to be considering, but the files will be still present. So on a regular cases, what will happen is you might have to clean your workspace with all those runtime files. Okay, so in that case, what we can do is we can use a command called git clean, and we can remove all those runtime files which we have created. Or simply we can say you can remove all the untracked files. So you have this file like this. Let me keep some file. Okay, so now if you say git status, typically it will be showing the same thing. If you add it into the git ignore, it will not be considering this, right? But no matter what you do, the files will still be present. So at any given point, if you don't want these files to be present and to be deleted for testing, then what you can do is simply you can use a command called git clean. Okay, when you say git clean, it will delete all the runtime files or all the untracked files which is present in your workspace. Okay, but sometimes it is not good to use it directly, because say that you are trying to create a new file along with all these things, then that will also get deleted. So first thing is you use an option called -n. What it means is it is the dry run which is going to show you on what files you want to keep and what files you want to delete. Okay, so in that case it is saying in your current workspace, these files, that is these three files, are untracked files. Okay, sorry, that is what it means. So now if you want to delete only these three, then along with this you can just say option force, so that it will delete it. Okay, so this command will come or it will be handy whenever you want to make sure that your workspace is clean. Clean in the sense you don't have all the previous reference or any runtime files, and you can start doing the build or doing the testing with respect to what changes you have done freshly. Okay,
Okay. Yes.
getting it?
Yes, Adam.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Adam, I don't know if you're gonna come to this later, but
And just to revamp what we saw, so generally when we try to do some changes, there might be scenarios where you want to undo it. So whenever you have multiple ideas to implement, and before you proceed with adding into the staging area or committing it, you want to undo the change. At the same time you want to take a backup, then you can make use of the git stash command, wherein you can come back and apply the changes what you have taken a backup or whatever you have stashed, which is going to work in the same way as your array concept, wherein you can pick which index of the stash you want to apply and use it in your working directory, and based on that you can modify and commit the changes. And at the same thing, suppose if you have added the changes to the staging area also, and if you want to revert it or undo the change, then we have to use git reset command, wherein based on the three working areas that you have in the git, that is working directory, staging area, and the repository, you can use the option correspondingly git reset soft, mixed, or hard, wherein by default you will be using the git reset hard, so that it will just bring back all the changes in these three places: working directory, staging area, and the repository. And in the same way, if you have already committed a change and if you want to revert a commit itself, then you use the command called git revert, where it will not only going to change the content of the file to its previous commit, but it is going to add a new commit with the reference of what changes that you have done. Okay, and finally, if you want to traverse between branch or traverse between the commit IDs, then we will be using git commit command, wherein If you say the branch name, then it will be taking the latest commit ID as the default for that branch. And if you see the commit ID, then it will be taking the default branch or the current branch where you're working for that commit ID, and it will be moving that. Okay. Okay. So I'll tell you one more thing, some Unix thing which you need to know. So if you see in the class, I was pretty much using this command echo, right? So echo is a command which is used to print some statement. That's it, very simple. If you're using some shell scripting kind of stuff, it might be coming handy, because if you want to print something, print some message, then it'll use. Okay, so if the same thing, if you just type in, it will print on your screen. This is what it is going to do default. Now, what I did is I was doing something like this and a file name, right? So what it is going to do is whenever you use this greater than symbol, it means that whatever that you have on your left hand, right, whatever command that you're doing, the output of this should be taken and put into the right hand side. Okay, that means this command is going to run this command and take the output, and it is going to put into this, wherein, as I said, in Linux everything is just a file. So when you just put it like this, then the content of what it is going to give us is what it is going to put. So that means this command is going to print some message like this, right? That means that content will be stored into this file. So this symbol is what we call it as redirection. Okay, wherein if you put it one greater than mark, then every time you run some command on the left hand side, that content is going to be overwritten in this file or replace it. Okay, wherein if you already have this file called 1.java, for example, now if I say second line, second message, okay, and if I say this, okay, let me show you what is that. Suppose if I say first message, okay, and I'm going to put some file called test. Okay, if you see, you would have created this file called test. So as I said, if you don't have anything, what the normal Linux command is going to do is it is going to create this file, because you are trying to put the content of this into this. So obviously the file has to be present. So if the file is not already present, then it will create the file and it will put the message. And now if you try to run this once again, okay, and if you see, once again, we already have the file previously, but here the redirection with one greater than mark is going to override the content what you had. Okay, so the same thing, instead of overwriting, if you want to append on an existing one, then simply you have to use two greater than. Okay, so two greater than means append in an existing one. So now see what will happen, the same thing. So in the same, if I just say here, okay, and what it is going to do, it is going to append. Append in the sense at the last. So already you have some content and you're going to append it once more at the end. Okay, so this is one of the simplest way wherein either I could have done like this, I could have did a touch of the file, then we could have edited the file, edited the test and modify it. So instead of that, I'm just using this redirection symbol so that it could take the content and put it into the file directly. So this is something which you will be using it on a normal case. So in tomorrow's class, I will go deep in and I'll show you about this editor called Vim, which we use in Linux by default. Because when you're working on Linux, you will be working on these files or modifying the file. So you might be knowing many other editors. So we have default Vim or VI is the default editor in Linux, and along with that we have many others like Emacs or so, which is quite complicated, but let's go with simple thing to understand. So I'll show you this in tomorrow. So for now, you try to understand. One, redirection means creating the new file or replacing the content, and two, redirection means appending the content into it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And one more thing. So you guys know the command called cd. What is it? Change
Change
directory.
directory.
Yeah, does everyone know how that works?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, Atvika.
Yes, sir.
So,
Yeah, I know, sir.
okay. So you guys know what is absolute path? What is the absolute path and the relative path?
Nope. I don't know.
No, sir.
No? Okay.
No.
So, so if you want to traverse from one directory to the other directory, you will use a command called cd, which means change directory. Okay. So now take this. So where are we currently? I am inside this. So pwd is a command which will tell you the current working directory. Okay. Now we are inside this new workspace too. Now how is that we should be going to other directory? Say that I want to go to the new workspace 1 directory which is present in this git directory. Now if you want to go to that, there are two ways. Either you can say something like this. Okay, I can now. So now we are inside this. This is one way. Or I can show you once again. So once again, if you want to go back, you can simply say the same thing here. Copy paste. Okay. You see, I just traversed. So you see the difference here. So what it means is, so in Linux, everything starts from the root. Okay, just like we have C drive and D drive in Windows. In Linux, everything starts with the root, that is the first slash. So if you want to refer to a path, you can either refer a path from the initial root to the current one. So which means now I referred here the complete path from the scratch, that is from the root directory to the exact directory. So giving like this the full path is called as absolute path, wherein instead of giving the absolute path, in relation to the current directory, we can change. For example, if I want to go to this new workspace 2, what I can do, simply I can say like this, which will go. This is absolute path. Instead of saying like this, what I can do is, I know this directory, this 02 is just one level backward. That means if I go cd double dot, what I'm doing, I am currently present in this, and this new workspace is present here. Then we can come here, right? So like this, in relation to the existing directory, if you move one level or two level and then come back, then that is called as relative. Suppose if the same thing, if I want to go back to new 01, I can just simply say double dot, wherein double dot will take you to the parent directory of your current directory. So you are inside this new 02. What is the parent for this, or the top level directory for this is this, right? That is one level up. Now, if I say cd double dot, it is going to take me back to this. But my interest is we should go directly into this. So simply what you can do is, in relation to this, we can say like this. So moving like this in relation to your existing branch is what we call it as relative method. Suppose if I want to go to this classroom folder or directory, simply what you can do is one double dot, which means from here it will bring it to this. And if I say slash once again double dot, from here it will bring us to this. You see, we are currently, and now if you want to go to this with the existing directory, you can simply say git, right? So these kind of specification wherein with the reference of your existing directory, if you move to some other directory, this is called as relative path, wherein if you give the complete path, it is called as absolute. Got the difference?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay, so just wanted to give some information. Okay, so I'll stop it here.